So, welcome to today's deep dive. And, usually when you think about a high school extracurricular activity, there's a pretty universal expectation of just relaxed supervision.
Right. Yeah. Like an extended recess, basically.
Exactly. You show up to a classroom after the final bell rings, you eat some steel pizza, maybe paint a poster or something.
And the teacher's just sort of sitting at their desk, grading papers, completely tuning you out,
Yeah, it's casual, it's unstructured, you're mostly just hanging out with your friends.
which is what we expect, right? We expect teenagers to just organically figure out their social dynamics on their own time. It's a very low stakes environment.
It is. But then, and this is why we're here today, you step into the world of Smasher's Stop and Shop, and that casual, low-stakes vibe, it is entirely gone.
Oh, completely out the window.
Instead, you're looking at this, microeconomy that runs with the structural intensity of a Fortune 500 company. So today, we're tearing apart an actual, unexpectedly rigorous document.
It really is wild.
It's from the 2012 to 2013 academic year. It's the Saul C. Johnson High Dickey School's Store Employee Handbook. And the mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly how this leadership team managed to turn high schoolers into a disciplined corporate workforce.
Complete with, cross-training and behavioral discharging.
And a highly regulated microeconomy. I was completely blown away by the tone of this thing.
It really is a fascinating artifact. I mean, you almost never see this level of structural clarity in adult workplaces,
Right.
let alone in a high school hallway.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And to really understand how this store operates, you have to look at the philosophical foundation they established right on page 1.
Yeah, they do not ease you in.
No, they do not. The Decade advisors, Mr. Teron Johnson and Mrs. Linda R. Green, along with the Decapist president, Shanteria Hugh, they write this welcome letter to the new recruits. And it does not pull punches.
It starts nice enough, right?
Sure, yeah.
Huh?
It starts by congratulating the student on joining the team, but it immediately pivots to the workload.
Like, welcome aboard, now here's the reality.
Right. They warn the students that the store is diverse,
Right.
that they won't be doing the same job every day, and that literally everyone will be educated in all aspects of the operation.
They are setting an expectation of high adaptability right out of the gate.
They are, but then they hit these kids with this striking phrase, and I'm just going to read it. They write, "We are like a family here in the store. If one struggle, all will struggle. You are only as strong as the weakest link."
Wow.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because out of context, that sounds incredibly intense for a teenager.
Oh, absolutely.
You are only as strong as the weakest link. That sounds like a high-stakes corporate manifesto. Or a football coach screaming in a locker room before the state championship.
Yeah, it's very do or die.
And for a 16-year-old whose previous responsibility was, maybe walking the family dog, isn't that putting a massive amount of pressure on them?
It is a massive amount of pressure, yeah. But what's fascinating here is that it's applied very intentionally. I mean, think about how a typical high school operates.
Academically.
Right. The entire educational system basically trains you to be an individual contributor. Your grades are your own.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, if you fail a math test, it doesn't lower the GPA of the student sitting next to you.
I-
You are evaluated in a complete silo.
That's true.
But by dropping that weakest link philosophy on page 1, the leadership completely shatters that individualized mindset.
So they're basically forcing them to realize their actions actually have collateral damage.
Precisely. They are introducing the concept of systemic risk.
In a high school.
Yes, because in a business, if the supply chain fails, the cashier has nothing to sell and the whole store suffers. By framing it this way, the leadership elevates the student's mindset from, I'm just hanging out after school to my peers are actively depending on me.
It's forced maturity.
It is. It establishes profound professional accountability and, frankly, a sense of psychological safety, too.
Wait, really? Safety? How so?
Well, if one struggles, all struggle. It means you can't just let your teammate drown at the register. You have to step in.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. You can't just operate in your own little bubble.
Right.
But, you also can't just talk about being a strong link. You have to physically embody it.
And this is where it gets really strict.
Yes, because the philosophical foundation is great. But the way they enforce that culture is through some incredibly strict visible standards. The rules of engagement for Smashers Stop and Shop do not mess around, starting with the dress code.
The dress code is such an interesting tightrope walk Because they have to navigate the tension of running a professional business while still physically being inside a high school.
And they get very specific. Like, they note that semi-business is preferred, but they will accept the correct school uniform.
Fair enough.
But then they list the bans. You must wear black, khaki, or plaid bottoms. Absolutely no jeans, no tights, no leggings. Tops have to be white or orange.
Highly regulated.
And they address the presentation directly. It says, ladies, please be presentable, no cleavage, and too short skirt or shorts. And for the guys, gentlemen, wear your pants at least close to the waist, no sagging.
Which is such a classic 2012 high school rule,
Right.
but really they're establishing a visual boundary.
Right.
When you put on that uniform, you are stepping out of your identity as just a regular high school student. You're stepping into your identity as a representative of the store.
But where the boundaries get truly sophisticated isn't just the clothes. It's the interpersonal regulations. Like, the manual explicitly redefines how these student employees are supposed to view their own classmates.
This is my favorite part.
It's wild. It states, and I quote, "Our peers, when they are in the store, are not your friends or associates. They are our customers."
That is a massive psychological pivot to ask of an adolescent brain.
Right. And the instruction that follows is what really got me. They are told to treat others how they want to be treated, to smile, to offer pleasantries like "thank you for coming." But the specific wording they use is, "Be courteous to everyone, friends and foes."
Friends and foes.
Yes. Imagine you are a listener right now, right? Put yourself back in high school. Imagine you are 16 years old. You are standing behind the register of Smasher's Stop and Shop in your little orange top and khaki pants.
Mm.
And your absolute high school nemesis walks in.
Oh, boy.
The person who, I don't know, stole your crush or started a terrible rumor about you.
Or bumped your lunch tray in the cafeteria.
Exactly. And instead of glaring at them or just refusing to serve them, you have to cheerfully ring up their snacks, look them right in the eye and say, "Thank you for coming."
Because business is business.
Because business is business.
It's wild to think about, but it's actually an incredibly vital lesson in emotional regulation. What the handbook is teaching here is compartmentalization.
Yes, they're separating the personal from the professional.
Exactly. When you cross the threshold into that store, your personal high school drama is it's paused. Your role dictates your behavior, not your emotions.
You literally have to leave your baggage at the door.
You do. And let's be honest, teaching a teenager that they can successfully interact with a quote-unquote foe in a productive, civil manner, that is a life skill that many adults still struggle with in the corporate world.
Oh, 100%.
How many times have you seen adult professionals refuse to collaborate because of some petty personal grievance?
Too many sounds to count.
Right. So Smasher's Stop and Shop is building resilience early on by demanding that business etiquette just overrides personal friction.
Okay, so you force high schoolers to dress in business casual, suppress their teenage drama, and literally smile at their enemies.
Yes.
But all of that discipline means absolutely nothing if the store itself is a chaotic mess. Like, how do they actually manage the flow of business with a rotating cast of kids?
This is where the operational matrix comes in.
Which is fascinating, because I was expecting them to just have, one or two generic people behind the counter bringing things up.
Just a free-for-all.
Right, just kids handing out chips.
Yeah.
But they split the floor into 4 highly distinct roles: cashier, tally, stock, and security. Why divide the labor so rigidly in a high school snack shop?
So what you're seeing there is a deeply sophisticated financial and operational concept called separation of duties.
Separation of duties.
Yeah, it's actually a foundational principle in risk management and accounting.
How does that play out with, say, the cashier and the tally roles?
Mm-hmm.
Because to a layman, those both just sound like people dealing with the money.
They do, yeah. But they serve very different functions to keep the system honest. The cashier handles the physical register.
Okay.
They do price checks, they maintain the drawer, and balance the cash and receipts. But the tally is essentially the accountant.
So they aren't rigging people up.
Right. They don't touch the drawer. They keep track of purchased items. They crunch the numbers on the spreadsheets and complete the deposit sheets.
Ah, I see.
Because if you have the same person taking the cash and managing the spreadsheets, it is incredibly easy for money to go missing, either through, honest mistakes or intentional theft.
Wow. So by separating the physical money from the ledger, Smasher's Stop and Shop creates a built-in system of checks and balances. That is brilliant. It's a dual control accounting system run by teenagers.
It really is.
And then you have the other 2 roles. Stock Is your logistics department managing inventory, replacing dwindling items, making sure the shelves are perfect?
Super important.
And security watches the inventory being purchased to prevent shoplifting.
Mm.
Plus, they handle the closing duties, like sweeping and wiping down.
Right.
It's not just a loose group of kids, it's an interconnected mechanism.
Mm.
It reminds me less of a retail counter and more of, like, a restaurant kitchen's brigade system.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You have the prep cook, the line cook, the expediter. They all have their distinct stations, but the whole service crashes if one of them falls behind.
It's exactly like that. And just like a kitchen brigade, the leadership at Smashers recognized that highly specialized roles can sometimes lead to silos.
Oh, for sure. People getting tunnel vision.
Right. Which brings us to probably the most genius part of their operational matrix.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at the bulleted list of responsibilities for these 4 roles, they all have distinct tasks, right?
Very distinct.
But there is one identical bullet point copy-pasted into every single job description. Cashier, greet customers, tally, greet customers, stock, greet customers, security, greet customers.
It's universal.
Literally. The person crunching numbers on a deposit sheet in the corner and the person sweeping the floor at the end of the day are both strictly mandated to greet the people walking in.
Which is brilliant. By making customer greeting a universal mandate across every single role, the leadership completely eliminates the not my job mentality.
Which is the absolute bane of every workplace.
It really is. In so many large organizations, someone in, say, logistics or IT might walk right past a confused client in the lobby because they think, well, I'm not front of house, that's reception's job.
Right. I just fix the computers.
Exactly. But this handbook explicitly states that the culture of hospitality belongs to everyone. It reinforces that weakest link philosophy.
It really ties back to that.
It does. You might be the tally, focused entirely on a spreadsheet, but if a customer walks in, you are part of the store's face. You are responsible for the environment.
And we actually get to see how these roles are deployed, too, because they included an example employee schedule grid in the handbook.
The famous matrix.
Yes, it tracks a Monday through Friday work week, broken down into morning and afternoon shifts. We see this roster of employees' kids named Jim, Jill, Tom, Kim, Sarah, Justin, and Jack. And they are completely rotating through the matrix.
They aren't static at all.
Not at all. On Monday morning, Jim is the cashier. By Wednesday morning, he's on security. On Thursday morning, he's doing tally.
Which delivers on the promise they made in that welcome letter.
Oh, right. The part about diverse jobs.
Exactly. They told them they would be educated in all aspects of the store. This constant rotation is aggressive cross-training.
So question about that. Does cross-training like that just build redundancy? Or is there another benefit? Like, obviously, if Jill calls out sick, Tom can step in because he knows how to run the register. But does it do something else for the culture of the team?
Oh, absolutely. Redundancy is the operational benefit, yes. But empathy is the cultural benefit.
Empathy. How so?
Well, when Jim is working security and gets annoyed that the cashier is moving too slow, he has to remember that he was the cashier 2 days ago. He knows exactly how stressful it is when the line backs up.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, cross-training prevents departments from warring with each other because everyone has walked in everyone else's shoes.
That's incredibly smart. I also noticed a fascinating operational quirk in that schedule matrix. For the stock position, the entire row for the morning shifts is explicitly labeled void.
Just void.
Yeah, you only stock in the afternoon. Which, when you think about it, it makes total logistical sense.
It shows a deep understanding of customer flow.
Right.
You do not want your employees dragging boxes of inventory out onto the floor and blocking the aisles during the morning rush.
When students only have a, 5-minute window to grab a snack before first period.
Exactly. It would be chaos. You prepare the battlefield at the end of the day so the morning crew can just focus entirely on throughput.
Okay, so we have these incredibly rigorous expectations. You have to wear the uniform perfectly, you have to cross-train on financial spreadsheets, you have to smile at your high school nemesis, and you have to greet every single person who walks in the door.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And the obvious question you have to ask is, why would a high school student voluntarily submit to all of this?
Right. What's in it for them?
Which brings us to the store's compensation model. They created a microeconomy of incentives, and their payroll department is honestly just as strict as their HR department.
Oh, for sure. The incentive structure is fascinating because it abandons the casual, free snacks for helpers model you usually see in schools.
Right, just toss a kid a soda for helping out.
Exactly. And it replaces it with a tight, consequence-based framework.
Yeah, so the core incentive is this. Employees receive a maximum $2 spending amount per shift per day on items in the store.
Just $2.
$2. You work your shift, you get $2 worth of chips or sodas.
Mm-hmm.
But the handbook is quick to note that if your total is greater than $2, you have to pay the difference out of pocket.
It is a hard cap. No exceptions.
And they set a massive boundary on volunteerism. The text literally bolds and capitalizes this. It says, if you are not scheduled to work and just wanted to come help, then you will not receive this incentive.
Which is a critical operational boundary.
Because otherwise, what happens?
Well, if they didn't enforce that, Smasher's Stop and Shop would instantly devolve into a hangout spot disguised as helping out.
Oh, definitely.
You'd have 10 kids showing up behind the counter, getting in the way of the cashier and the tally, all expecting free food.
Just total chaos.
Right. By strictly tying the incentive to the scheduled roster, they treat the $2 as a formal wage, not a casual perk.
And just like a real wage, it can be docked. The handbook lists reductions and penalties. You lose the incentive entirely for not completing your shift, for trying to sneak more than the $2 max, or if you get discharged for the day because of misbehavior.
They do not play around.
They really don't. But here is the part of the handbook that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. And I really want your take on this.
Okay, lay it on me.
They provide a specific example to illustrate how you lose your incentive, and they use our guy Jim from the Schedule Matrix.
Ah, yes. The infamous Jim example.
Poor Jim.
Yeah?
The example explicitly states, as I'm quoting here, if Jim started his afternoon but had to leave for practice or tutorial before the store was closed and everything was complete, then Jim will only be allowed to receive 50 cents to $1 worth of items in the store.
A harsh reality.
But wait a minute. I went back and checked page 1. In the rules section, they explicitly stated, and I quote again, your education is first priority. We understand that you may have tutorial before, but please give a heads up.
Right, they literally excuse leaving for academics.
They do. But Jim goes to a tutorial to prioritize his education, and Smasher's Stop and Shop slashes his snack budget by 50 to 75%. So what does this all mean? Because to me, it feels incredibly contradictory to tell kids school comes first, but then financially penalize them when they actually go study.
I completely understand why it feels like a penalty and why it feels contradictory on the surface.
It just seems unfair.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of the real workforce, this is actually a masterclass in teaching the difference between compensated time and salaried guarantees.
Okay, walk me through that, because it feels a bit ruthless for a school environment.
It feels ruthless because we are conflating moral judgment with operational compensation. The handbook isn't saying Jim is a bad person or a bad employee for going to this tutorial. In fact, like you said, they encourage him to prioritize his education.
Right.
But in a business environment, an hourly or shift-based worker is compensated for the labor they actually provide to the enterprise.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. If Jim leaves halfway through the afternoon shift to go to math tutoring, he leaves the closing duties, the sweeping, the wiping down, the deposit sheets to his teammates.
He didn't finish the job.
He didn't finish the job. Therefore, he only receives a prorated portion of the compensation, 50 cents to $1.
Wow. So it's not a fine, it's just a reflection of hours worked.
Exactly. It teaches the student that choices, even very good, responsible choices, have opportunity costs.
That is, wow.
You can and absolutely should choose your education over the store, but you do not get to claim the full reward of a shift you didn't finish just because your reason for leaving was noble.
Because in the adult world, if you leave your hourly shift early to go to the doctor, your boss might be completely supportive, but you still don't get paid for those hours you weren't on the clock.
Exactly. Smasher's Stop and Shop is separating moral validation from payroll.
That is incredibly grown up. You worked half the shift, you get half the chips. The math doesn't care about your motives.
Precisely. And by putting this explicitly in writing, using Jim as an example, they remove all the emotional drama from the transaction.
Yeah, you can't argue with it.
Right. When Jim gets his 50 cents, he can't argue that Mr. Johnson or Mrs. Green is being unfair because the expectation was set perfectly in the handbook before he ever stepped behind the register. Clarity prevents conflict.
Clarity prevents conflict. Man, which really brings us full circle on what this whole document represents.
It really does.
As we sort of synthesize everything we've looked at today, I want you, the listener, to think about your own early work experiences. Think about the first job you ever had, or even how you currently onboard new employees in your own life or business.
Because it's universally applicable.
It is. Because looking at this 2012 to 2013 Smashers Stop and Shop handbook, it becomes incredibly clear that Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Green, and Chanteria Hugh weren't just running a place to sell sodas to teenagers.
Not at all.
They were hosting a masterclass in boundary setting. They took high schoolers and taught them the realities of separation of duties, cross-training, emotional regulation, and prorated compensation.
They absolutely did. And, it leaves me with a thought that I think is really worth mulling over.
Yeah.
When you look at the absolute clarity of this document, the way it perfectly defines roles to prevent theft, the way it establishes universal customer service so no one can say, that's not my job, and the way it enforces a strict consequence-based incentive structure without apology, it begs a much broader question.
I'm ready for it.
If a 2012 high school DECA store can successfully establish that level of structural perfection and hold a team of teenagers fully accountable, why do so many modern adult corporate environments still struggle to clearly define their own roles and hold their teams accountable?
Oof. That is a fantastic and slightly convicting question to end on.
It really makes you think.
It does. Because clearly, the blueprint for a highly functional organization is out there. It's just sitting right in the high school archives.
Just waiting to be read.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the surprisingly intense, rigorously structured world of teen retail operations. Until next time, remember, whether you're sitting in a corporate boardroom or wiping down the counters at Smashers Stop and Shop, you really are only as strong as your weakest link.